Good morning, everyone. Today I am going to discuss the second part of this cholera topic. So, yesterday we have seen till agent factors, and today I am going to discuss regarding host factors and the continuation of the topic. Coming to the host factor, so what are the hosts? Hosts include human beings. It could be male, either female. So, age and gender. Cholera affects all age groups and both gender. In endemic areas, the attack rate is higher in children. In which group it is very higher? It is very higher in children during endemics, and it is attacking both male as well as female, and it is occurring from 0 to all ages. It is occurring from infants to adults. Gastric acidity. So this gastric acidity plays one of the crucial role in preventing this disease. So the higher the pH, the favorable conditions for the organism to grow. The lower the pH, unfavorable conditions for the organism to grow. The Vibrio is destroyed at an acidity of pH 5 or less than 5. So what this statement is saying, the lower the pH, the harder for the organism to survive. So, condition that affect gastric acidity may influence individual susceptibility. Next one is population mobility. So, movement of the population. So, where there is large number of gatherings, where there is more number of people are coming together. For example, if you take pilgrimage like Kumbh Mela, where crores and crores of people are coming and staying in a single place. So it was a pilgrim. And in marriages, in fairs and festivals, what is happening? More number of people are coming and closely meeting to each other. So during this time, any person who is a case or who is a carrier, he is capable of contaminating, means spreading the disease from one person to another person. So how the disease is transmitted from country to country means any person who is coming from other countries to the affected country, when he gets exposed, if he remains asymptomatic, if he becomes a carrier or a case, at that time when he returns back to his own country, he is capable of transmitting the disease from one person to another person. This is population mobility. Next one is economic status. Based on the economic status, so you can observe cholera more in the low socio-economic status people, because their living standards were low and these people are unable to afford for clean and good drinking water, and the facilities and their living conditions were always in the lower side, which is favoring the organism to grow and infect the persons. When their socio-economic status is low, automatically their personal hygiene and their food habitats and their drink and their water facilities, everything will be in lower side, which is favoring the disease in the low socio-economic status group. Coming to the immunity, an attack of cholera is followed by immunity to reinfection, but the duration and degree of immunity are not known, and this vaccination gives only partial immunity, that is for 3 to 6 months. This is regarding immunity. Coming to the environmental factors. So what are these environmental factors? Vibrio transmission is highly possible in a community with poor environmental sanitation. Where there is poor environmental sanitation, there the Vibrio cholerae has high favorable conditions to get transmitted from one person to another person. The environmental factors of importance include contaminated water and food. So where the food and water are contaminated, there the disease is being spread from one person to another person. So this comprises certain human habits favoring water and soil pollution, low standards of personal hygiene, lack of education and poor quality of life. All these are the causes for transmission of disease. Coming to the mode of transmission, as I said, this one is mainly transmitted through feces and contaminated food and by direct contact. So transmission Transmission occurs from man to man via facially contaminated water, where there is, you can see the people who are defecating in open areas, the people who are defecating in open areas, in rural areas, these people are directly going and contaminating the river waters and lake waters. If the persons were affected with these type of disease, he is automatically transferring the vibrio to the good and fresh waters, where the water is become contaminated and the disease is being transferred from one person to another person. That's what it is saying. Transmission occurs via man to man. It is mainly occurring between one man to another man. In which ways? Facially contaminated. You can see in the picture, these people are drinking the contaminated water. These people are drinking the contaminated water. We don't know which water was mixed in these waters. And contaminated foods without proper hygiene, without proper hygiene and without proper personal hygiene, all these favorable conditions are helping the organism to infect one person to another person. So first one is facially contaminated water. From where this facially contaminated water is coming? So we have some natural resources of water, such as wells, ponds, lakes, streams and river pools. We cannot control this. We may control, but we cannot control to the huge extent. And when these waters are contaminated with this organism Vibrio cholerae or Eltar vibrio, this water is capable of infecting the persons. This water is capable of infecting the persons. Contaminated foods and drinks. So here contaminated foods and drinks, how it is coming means, if any infected person, any case or a carrier is coming in contact with the food or the water that we drink or that we eat, automatically he is transferring from one person to another person. And the other one is bottle feeding for the children. It will cause a huge risk. Because we don't know whether the milk was uncontaminated or pure. We don't know what is happening there. We don't know what kind of water had been mixed previously. So all these conditions are giving rise to the infection. And fruits and vegetables, whenever we are washing with the fruits and vegetables with water, if you wash those vegetables and fruits with a contaminated water, then it is possible to have this cholera. And cooked foods can get contaminated by contaminated human handling and by flies. So through flies also it is getting contaminated. And the other one is direct contact. So this direct contact is having more importance in developed countries. It is having more importance in developed countries. Why it is having importance in developed countries means, in developed countries they are maintaining the proper food hygiene, they are maintaining their personal hygiene, whereas they are going in contact with every person by shaking their hands. So whenever a person infected with this disease is coming in contact directly with a person through fingers while carelessly handling human excreta or vomiters, or patients through contaminated liquids and fomites, this disease is transferring from one person to another person. Coming to the incubation period, the incubation period is generally of 5 days, but on average it is of 1 to 2 days. Coming to the pathogenesis of this disease, what is this infection cholera? It is an intestinal infection. So where should the bacteria go and originate? Where should the bacteria go and settle? Definitely the bacteria will go and settle in the intestine. So pathogen gets through the mucosa, which overrides the intestinal epithelium. This probably secrete an enzyme called mucinase. It will help the organism to move rapidly through the mucus. So what is happening? When the pathogen is entering into the body, it is going and settling in the intestine, and it is secreting a special enzyme known as mucinase. This mucinase, it is helping the organism to move rapidly through the mucus. The vibrio gets adhered to the intestinal epithelial cells. What is happening? The vibrio, whenever it is entering into the intestinal mucosa, it is attaching to the epithelial cells of the intestines. So this vibrio becomes adherent to the mucosa, and it produces two types of toxins, L toxin and H toxin, where L is known as light toxin and H is known as heavy toxin. This L toxin, it combines with the substances in the epithelium cell membrane. They are known as gangliosides. This L toxin is going and attaching with the gangliosides, and these gangliosides are binding to the cell wall. Where they are binding? They are binding to the cell wall, and this binding, once it was done, it was irreversible. And coming to the H toxin, we don't know yet what is the mechanism, and it is not fully clear. But H toxin, it activates adenyl cyclase in the intestinal epithelial cells. It is activating adenyl cyclase. The activated adenyl cyclase causes a rise in 3,5-adenosine monophosphate. It is causing a rise in 3,5-adenosine monophosphate. So this 3,5-adenosine monophosphate provides energy which drives the fluid and ions into the lumen of intestine. What it is doing? It is disturbing it is activating the adenyl cyclase. This activated adenyl cyclase is going and giving rise to the 3 and 5 adenosine monophosphate. This adenosine monophosphate, it is giving energy for the fluid and ions to the lumen of intestine. The fluid is isotonic and is secreted by the segments of small intestine. The increase in fluid is the cause for diarrhea. So have you understood the mechanism here? This H toxin, it is going and activating adenyl cyclase. So whenever the adenyl cyclase is activated in intestinal epithelium cells, this one is giving rise to 3 and 5 adenosine monophosphate. So what is this 3 and 5 adenosine monophosphate is responsible for? It is responsible for moving of the fluid and ions into intestine. The increased levels of fluid in the intestine will cause the diarrhea. Means it is extracting the fluid from the outer side into the intestine, where it is causing the diarrhea, and the fluid and electrolytes are being lost during the disease. This is the pathogenesis of this cholera. Coming to the signs and symptoms of this cholera. What are the common symptoms you can observe? Watery diarrhea will be present, and nausea and vomiting will be present, and dehydration present. And coming to the severe symptoms, you can see low blood pressure, and you can see rapid heart rate. You can see persistent vomiting and muscle cramps. So these are the common signs and symptoms. Coming to the in severe cholera, where the person is losing more amount of fluid, more than the capacity. If the person is going for at least 40 to 50 stools, then you can observe these types of symptoms, where that is cyanosis, sunken eyes, you can see cyanosis on the dryness of mouth, you can see muscle cramping, you can see kusumal breathing, and blood pressure will drop, and vomiting of clear fluid you can see, because of the H toxin. What it is doing? It is extracting, it is favoring the transmission of extracellular fluid into the intestines. And the other one is diarrhea. You can see Vibrio cholerae here. These are the Vibrio cholerae. These are the signs and symptoms of cholera. Coming to the clinical features. So the severity depends upon the amount of fluid that had been lost. How the severity is based? The severity is based on the amount of fluid which had been lost. So a typical case consists of how many stages? 3 stages. If you have seen the first episode, you know what is a typical case. Where the more amount of fluid is lost and the symptoms are in a severe state. You can observe sunken eyes, and the blood pressure is going on, and you may not even palpate the pulse, and you will notice a decreased temperature in the body. So the 3 stages which are including are stage of evacuation, stage of collapse, and stage of recovery. Coming to the stage of evacuation. So the onset of this cholera, it is abrupt. Immediate onset is there for this cholera. The onset is abrupt with profuse, painless, and watery diarrhea, which is followed by vomiting. The patient may pass as many as 40 stools in a day. The stools may have rice watery appearance. I'll show you how the stool will look like. So this is the rice watery stool. Why this is occurring? This is occurring because more amount of fluid is drawn into the intestines. So the amount of fluid which is drawn into the intestines has to be excreted out. So it is excreted out in the way of rice watery stool. So stage of collapse. What is the next stage? It is the stage of collapse. The patient then passes into the, so once the patient is going for at least 40 to 50 stools in a day, the patient is directly entering into the stage of collapse. So what is happening in this stage? The patient is going dehydration. So in this stage you can observe, as I said, sunken eyes are there, hollow cheeks are there, scaphoid abdomen, you can see in the picture, washerman hand and feet, and loss of elasticity of skin, and subnormal temperature you can observe, absent of pulse will be there, low blood pressure will be there, shallow and quick respiration will be there, and oliguria will be present. Following the severe symptoms, the output of the urine also decrease. The output of the urine also getting decreased. How the output of the urine is getting decreased here? Why it is getting decreased? Because there is loss of fluid in the body and the patient is in dehydration. Ultimately, as the body fluid is decreasing, there is no fluid for the renal system to excrete. You got my point? So as there is decreased body fluid, the renal system will face lack of fluid. When there is no sufficient amount of fluid in the body, ultimately the urine gets suppressed, and it may result in the failure of the renal system. The patient become restless and complains of intense thirst and cramps in the legs and abdomen. Death may occur due to the dehydration and acidosis resulting from diarrhea. Coming to this third stage of recovery. If the death is not occurring in the patient, then the patient begins to show the signs and symptoms of improvement. So what is happening? The blood pressure will start to increase and the temperature will return to its normal, and urine secretion is re-established. And if anuria persists, the patient may die due to the renal failure. Why this anuria is persisting? As I said, when there is decreased amount of fluid in the body, there is no enough and or sufficient fluid for the kidneys. So when the function is being sustained, when the function is being paused, ultimately it may result in the renal failure. Lab diagnosis. Coming to the other point, lab diagnosis. So what is this lab diagnosis? They are mainly done in the stools and vomiting. They are mainly done in the stools and vomiting. A fresh specimen of stools should be collected for the laboratory examination, and sample should be collected before the person is treated with antibiotics. When you have to collect the sample before the person is treated with antibiotics, and collection may be made in one of the following ways. So there are different types of collection. First one is rubber catheter collection, and second one is rectal swab, and third one is it is collected directly from stool, and fourth one is it is collected from the vomitus. It is collected from the vomitus. So coming to the rubber catheter collection, the size of the catheter is about 26 to 28, and it should be sterilized before it is used. The catheter is introduced for at least 4 to 5 centimeters into the rectum. The specimen voided may be collected directly into the transport media, which is known as Ramakrishnan media. It is also known as VR medium or alkaline peptone water. Next one is rectal swab. The swab will be like 15 to 20 centimeters long with wooden stick, and the ends of the wooden stick will be having this cotton swab which is swabbed to the stick. So the rectal swab, it was dipped into the medium before it is being introduced into the rectum. To which medium it is dipped means you can dip it in the alkaline peptone water, or else you can dip it in the Clary Blair medium. You can dip it in the Clary Blair medium. Stick that we have to stake, it should be like 15 to 20 meters and it should be wrapped with the cotton. So before you insert the stick into the rectum, you should dip it in the solution, you should dip it in the medium, then you have to introduce it into the rectum. If no transport medium is available, a cotton tipped rectal swab should be soaked into the liquid. So with this I want to end this session. In next session I am going to discuss you regarding the control of cholera. Thank you for listening.